the Makala Incident. It's early morning in Kinshasa, May 2017. The sun isn't even fully up yet, but the heat is already punching through the air like a furnace. Inside Makala prison, one of the most overcrowded prisons in all of Africa, the day starts the same way it always does. Noise everywhere. And the smell of thousands of men packed into a space built for a few hundred. But on this particular morning, something felt wrong. First, it was the distant popping sound, then a scream, then the unmistakable crack of gunfire slicing through the prison yard. And suddenly, what was supposed to be another miserable morning turned into the largest prison escape the country had seen in decades. A heavily armed group had attacked the perimeter, and the moment the inmates realized what was happening, all logic died instantly. There was no strategy or plan, just one overwhelming instinct: run. Now. Within minutes, over 4,000 prisoners were pushing, clawing, and smashing their way toward the exits. Imagine thousands of bodies forcing themselves through narrow gates that were never designed for this, people climbing over others, some falling and being crushed under waves of panicked inmates, others trying to scale walls wrapped in rusted wire, slipping and tearing themselves open, and the guards were outnumbered more than 200 to 1. Many of them started firing into the air, and then into the crowds. By the time the chaos finally slowed, the ground was littered with bodies, burned, trampled, shot, collapsed from suffocation in the crush. Around 100 people didn't survive trying to escape. Some made it over the wall, some didn't even make it 5 feet from their cell doors. And that was only the beginning. The 2024 Makala Fire. Fast forward 7 years, in the same prison and same overcrowding. But this time, the night of September 2nd was worse than anyone could have imagined. Most inmates were asleep when it started. A fire inside one of the cell blocks. It wasn't an accident. Inmates had lit anything they could find to spark chaos. Clothes, mats, plastic, even pieces of broken beds. Within minutes, thick black smoke flooded the corridors. But smoke wasn't the thing that killed the most people, it was the panic. Everyone began running toward the same exit points, but the hallways were so narrow that bodies jammed together instantly. People were screaming for air, pushing so hard that some inmates died standing, crushed upright in a human wall of panic. Others slipped under the stampede and were trampled so violently their bones were shattered. Some burned alive, trapped behind doors that jammed from the heat. And when guards started shooting to stop the chaos, the panic only turned more deadly. By sunrise, the scene didn't look real. It looked like something out of a war documentary. 129 inmates didn't survive, 24 shots. The rest were killed by the stampede, the smoke, or the fire. Some were found piled so high near the exits that rescuers couldn't immediately tell how many bodies were underneath. It wasn't an escape, it was a disaster. Every inmate who died in these stories wanted the same thing, a chance at freedom. But anyway, that's enough trauma for today. Go drink some water, touch some grass, maybe remind yourself that your worst day probably isn't this bad. And if you want more insane stories like these, subscribe.